There are forces of good and forces of evil at work in the world today. What are these forces? Who is responsible for the good? And who is responsible for the evil? RichardShoff talks about current events which are rarely discussed by the mainstream media, events that affect us all. This program seeks to identify, to inform, and to equip the believer for what's ahead. Welcome to What in the World is Going On?
This is What in the World is Going On. I'm your host, RichardShoff. The program is sponsored by Lincoln Log Homes of Kannapolis, North Carolina. We're pro-Christian, pro-American, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and here only by the grace of God. Don't you love our president? Aren't you glad you're an American? And aren't you glad that we got Donald Trump in the White House? With the Democrats in mass, the news media in the majority, the anti-Trumpers, they're all in a frenzy. Many Republicans are joining them too. They're all freaking out. They're all hemorrhaging. Wow. Our president had a private meeting with Putin. Can you believe it? The audacity of it all. Wow, how could he dare to do that with no live news coverage, no reporters covering it, no witnesses, no one to help him, no one to speak up for him? But there are some voices speaking out for him. What does our president do? He doubles down in spite of all of this. He calls out Putin to come to Washington to visit him. He's got the nerve to send John Bolton to invite Putin to the U.S. for a second summit. With all of the press pointing out that he's so unqualified, what a sellout. And yet he doubles down. Wow. Maybe they'll even meet down at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. Maybe Putin can play golf. They go golfing together. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Has anyone spoken out for our president? Yes. Have you seen it in the mainline media? No. But I'm going to spend a few minutes today going over quoting some sources of people that are speaking out for our president. Items you don't find in the mainline media. Voices you don't hear. Congressman Duncan Hunter out in California. Duncan Hunter from years ago. He was involved in the Iran-Contra back in the Reagan era. A longtime conservative. He's defending President Donald Trump, even though he's been widely criticized for his remark alongside President Putin. He says, according to Hunter, Trump just has a different technique. He does things different. Yeah, he sure does. Remember Bush II? He looked into Putin's eyes and got all misty-eyed, I guess. Thought he could saw nothing but a sanctimonious man in those eyes. Remember Obama? He got caught on an open mic telling a leader of Russia, just wait till after the next election. I can move around better, then I can do more for you. That on an open mic. Were either one criticized like President Trump? You're right. They weren't. Duncan Hunter says Trump has a different technique, and that's why I voted for him. That's why the American people elected him, the congressman noted, saying that Trump doesn't want to act like one of those guys you've just played talking here, saying all those nice words. What he wants to do is get things done. And Congressman Hunter says, I got no problem with that. My trust is in our commander-in-chief. Another Republican congressman, this one from Maryland, he sang a tune that sounded like one from President Trump this week when he bashed the mainstream media for negatively reporting about the Helsinki summit. Representative Andy Harris, Republican of Maryland, commented on Trump's meeting with President Putin by calling it, quote, a successful summit. This according to the Baltimore Sun. Harris then delivered a direct shot to reporters, quote, I disregard and discount anything that involves a mainstream media press, he said. Given the unfriendliness of the press toward our president, why should we focus on a press conference? Why should we concentrate on the summit? The summit, in fact, had the two world superpowers sitting down and discussing in a civilized way for 2 hours privately, and then 2 hours with a staff the wide gauntlet of issues that are important to this world. I call that a success. End quote from Congressman Harris. During a press conference with members of the House Freedom Caucus, Harris said members of the media wasted their breath by asking questions about Russia's election meddling. They ask about election collusion or election meddling. That's the problem, Harris said. This wasn't a press conference. A press conference is where you discuss real issues. You've got the opportunity with two of the world's superpowers, and instead, what question do they get? Gee, do you have anything on our president? That's the way the press ought to conduct itself, to be honest with you. It sure isn't, is it, folks? It sure isn't. If I were the president, I wouldn't hold those press conferences anymore until the press decides to get serious about the world issues, serious as our president is. A quote from Representative Andy Harris. Senator Tim Scott down in South Carolina says on Trump's foreign policy, so far so good. Senator Scott, this past Thursday, characterized President Trump's foreign policy chops as, quote, so far so good. A guest on Fox News' outnumbered afternoon program, the South Carolina Republican insisted that we have confidence in the President of the United States on what he says. A quote from Senator Scott. Scott made it clear Russia's an adversary. Scott went on to say, it behooves us to have the healthiest working possible relationship between our leader and theirs. That relationship should focus on making sure that Russia stays in its lane and that does not become part of what we're trying to accomplish as a nation. I think the president's trying to do that. End quote from Senator Scott. Senator Rand Paul says, quote, McCain is out to lunch. He says this on the Trump-Putin comments. Senator Ron Paul characterized his colleague Senator McCain as being wrong for the past 4 decades. He made critical remarks about Monday's U.S.-Russian summit in Helsinki. Paul appeared on Fox News and said McCain's comments, the ailing senator called the meeting between President Trump and Russian President Putin as, quote, a tragic mistake, end quote. Paul says McCain was misguided. Maybe the president wants conflict in the world, less conflict to be sure, and there's a less likelihood of war. I believe that to be true. A quote from Rand Paul. Paul also praised Monday's meeting between the two leaders, making him a minority voice among a sea of criticism thrown at Trump for not standing up to Russia and his claims it meddled in the 2016 elections. I think we need to take a step back and ask ourselves, is it good to have conversation with your adversaries? Is it good to have open lines of communication with Russia? A question from Paul on the Cavoto show. He continues, and I quote, the worst part of the Cold War, probably the Cuban Missile Crisis. Former President John F. Kennedy had a direct line during that time with former Soviet Premier Khrushchev. We had an ambassador in Russia. We had an ambassador in Russia even during the years of Stalin. I think open lines of communication is very important for avoiding war. That's what I would see this meeting as, renewing engagement and renewing open lines of conversation. A quote from Senator Rand Paul. And Rush Limbaugh said, watching the U.S. media cover Monday's Putin-Trump summit, he called it comedy gold, his words, but added the downside of its ineptitude, that is so-called journalists, and how they can wreak tremendous havoc on everything. The conservative radio voice said he did not know whether to laugh or to be angry at the embarrassingly shallow and infantile questions asked of President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin on Monday in Helsinki, Finland. He said, and I quote, the problem with our media becoming a collective joke is that they have the ability to wreak tremendous havoc and to do great damage. But these things and these people are laughingstock, and they don't even know it. They don't have the humility or even the presence of mind to know how they're perceived, Limbaugh said. It's amazing to me to watch the right before your eyes decline of that stature, the respect, the integrity, and the perceived intelligence of members of the United States White House or Presidential Press Corps. A quote from Rush Limbaugh. The best question for comedy, but the worst for integrity, was a reporter who asked Putin if Russia had compromising material on Trump. Another quote from Limbaugh: "The world is not waiting for journalists to ask questions, but the journalist thinks it's all about them, which is what tells me that many of them are, what they're thinking about, because I think they still to this day and get up every day hoping this day is going to be the day that whatever smoking evidence is out there, there's finally revealed enough that'll allow them to get rid of Donald Trump." So they try to make it happen with these embarrassingly shallow, infantile questions. And they want to tell us that they're all the guardians of our freedom and democracy. And these people are not even informed enough to ask substantive questions of Vladimir Putin. A fine tribute to our press. And Alan Dershowitz said that the Democrats are those calling President Donald's performance on Helsinki an act of treason. And he said that those that are doing it have gone completely over the top. He noted that this is noted by the law scholar and professor as he spoke to conservative voice Hugh Hewitt on Thursday's radio. "You might not like what Trump did," he said, "but to call it treason is just wrong as a matter of constitutional law." A quote from Alan Dershowitz. What President Trump is alleged to have done, making the image of Putin stronger and helping him gain international credibility around the world, doesn't even come close to treason under the Constitution. A quote from Alan Dershowitz. It's another example of shrill Democrats making Trump even stronger with his base, Dershowitz pointed out. He continues, and I quote, "It shows that the Democrats and the opponents of Trump are not making nuanced, carefully thought through, calibrated criticisms. They're going completely over the top," Dershowitz said. However, there's a reason that Democrats and Trump haters are intentionally choosing the word treason, even though it's not remotely applicable. Treason is one of the two crimes specified for impeachment, and that's why I think so many of the Trump opponents are focusing on treason, because if he did commit treason, then he'd be subject to impeachment. A quote again from Dershowitz. "The criteria for treason is clearly laid out in the Constitution, and people shouldn't just be making up crimes," he noted. So I think we're seeing Trump's opponents lose credibility by making these kind of arguments that just have no basis in law or the Constitution. Dershowitz also noted again, "I didn't vote for Trump, I voted for Clinton. I'm a liberal Democrat, but I don't want to see the law stretched just to target somebody whose politics we disapprove of." Trump noted Monday, he said that both he and Putin lamented the wedge that had been driven between the United States and Russia because of the investigation of special counsel Robert Mueller. In his first television interview shortly after his one-on-one with Russian President Putin, Trump told friend and Fox News host Sean Hannity, quote, "We've had a phony witch hunt. We've had this deal, and it's driven us apart." President Putin, one of the earliest things he said to me when we started, "It's really a shame because we could do so much good, whether it's humanitarian aid throughout the Middle East. Oh, there's so many different things," Trump noted. "We could talk about the safety of nuclear power, which ultimately there's nothing bigger and more important. But they drove a phony wedge." Trump asserted Putin is angry about the Mueller probe and the indictment of the 12 Russian military intelligence officers. He knows exactly what it's all about, Trump said. "It's very interesting what is happening. You look at the whole thing. He understands it. I don't know if you could see it or not, but he was incensed even talking about it. But he's willing to let Mueller's people go over there, do an investigation, people working together with the Russian investigators." Trump also declared because of his back-to-back summits with North Korea, Kim Jong-un, and Putin, a potential problem may well have been averted. "Dealing with two nuclear nations, the two of us have over 90% of the nuclear power in the world between them," Trump said, "and we've had a phony witch hunt to drive a deal and to drive us apart. It's the thing that Putin told me. He said, 'What a shame.' He felt it was very hard for me to make a deal because all this nonsense. It's just a sad thing. It's a very sad thing for our country," noted our president. But as pointed out by Lloyd Marcus, Trump really outboxed them all. He got them again. Marcus points out Trump's wise for not falling into the Democrat fake news media and the deep state's trap by saying Russia tampered with our election. Russia's tried to impact our elections forever. With 12 Russians indicted in the Russian collusion investigation, no Americans were indicted. Deputy Attorney General Rob Rosenstein stated that Russia's tampering had no impact on the outcome of our presidential election. In other words, Trump won, fair and square. Conservative pundits who joined the American left and the deep state chorus demanding that Trump admit Russian tampering still don't get it. What part of the American left and deep state's contempt for fairness or truth do these conservatives not understand? The American left and deep state are laser focused on kicking Trump out of office by any means necessary. All they're interested in is Trump gifting them with a soundbite that they can distort and lie to harm him with. If Trump said Russia tampered but did not impact our election, fake news here would report, Trump admits Russian tampering. MSNBC would report, quote, Trump practically admitted he colluded with Russia to steal the election from Hillary. Nowhere in the fake news media frenzy would you hear the second part of Trump's statement, quote, it did not impact our election, end quote. We know the drill, folks. How many times have leftists laid gotcha traps for conservatives and Republicans? How many times they got to do it before our side gets it? When are Republicans and conservatives going to understand that they cannot play nice, appease, try to reason with, or find common ground with these leftist fanatics? These evil, hate-filled people want conservatives, Republicans, and Trump politically dead, period. It's not an exaggeration to say many political elitists and leftists want our president physically dead. It's wise that Trump typically doubles down rather than apologize for anything he says and does. The American left and deep state would regard any apology as a crack in Trump's armor, blood in the water, an opening to attack him, and even more distortions and lies. The Trump-hating behemoth is not about being fair, balanced, or reasonable. Everything they do and say is about removing Trump from office and destroying the lives of himself and his family, even 12-year-old Barron. An outrageous New York Magazine headline proves the point. Mueller's new indictment points to collusion with Russia. That was the headline. Well, what the heck are these people in New York Mag talking about? Mueller's investigation said Russia's tampering did not impact a single vote in Trump's victory. Yet New York Mag is distorting this truth to mislead low-info voters to still believe that the absurd lie that the American left and the deep state have promoted for almost 2 years, that Trump stole the election from Hillary. Folks, this is the dishonesty that we're up against regarding our fake news media. Again, let's ask, why on earth should Trump try to appease these people? We love America expressing his disrespect for fake news media, continuing to boldly stick it to him, while still steamrolling them with America Make Great agenda. All we can ask is that we all stay firmly in Trump's corner, assuring him that we the people have his back. Amen. Amen. And a correction, Trump did not absolve Russians of meddling. Donald Trump did not say the Russians didn't meddle in the U.S. election. Remember that when you read heated statements from the leftist shrills and people like Jeff Flake and John McCain. The left is in full lie mode, and leftists will say anything while assuming that their audience will never actually hear the truth. Here's what really happened. First, Trump said, during today's meeting, I addressed directly with President Putin the issue of Russian interference in our elections. I felt this was a message best delivered in person. I spent a great deal of time talking about it, and President Putin may very well want to address it, and very strongly, because he feels very strongly about it too. Trump later followed up with this. I have great confidence in my intelligence people, but I will tell you that President Putin was extremely strong and powerful in his denial today. Putin could be lying, but nothing Trump said boils down to, quote, the Russians didn't meddle, end quote. Rather, Trump was being diplomatic and didn't directly call Putin a liar. Remember when the left said Trump would be horrible in diplomacy because he'd be out of control? Well, now that he's used a little diplomatic phrasing, the left is screaming at him for not being more like a bull in a china shop. It's objectively true that no matter what Trump does, the left will declare it's horrible. Because the media was distorting what he'd said, Trump clarified his position with a subsequent tweet. Quote, as I said today and many times before, I have great confidence in my intelligence people. However, I also recognize in order to build a brighter future, we cannot exclusively focus on the past as the world's two largest nuclear powers. We must get along. End quote. Trump further pointed out the obvious truth. The left is using supposed Russian interference as a way to delegitimize Trump, even though no one is saying the Russians actually changed any vote counts. If it turned out that the Russians didn't impact the results of the election, then the left's main tool to attack Trump would disappear. Hence, the left is highly insensitized to lie about Russian interference. After 8 years of Obama, leftists believed that they were the new fascist ruling elites, that elections were mere formalities. Folks, Trump's election took away what the leftists prized most and what they believed they were entitled to due to the fact that they're smarter, kinder, and all around better than the rest of us. That is the power that they think they have to run our lives. The left will not rest until it controls every aspect of our lives, including how many children we have, what marriage is, how much soda we can drink, how much plastic we can use, and what we must believe. Because the left identifies as a better part of America, leftists are perfectly comfortable with any amount of lying to overturn an honest election. To the left, the end always justifies the means. That's why the left went from being apologists for any crime committed by Russia, a role they held from 1918 to 2017, to where they are today, foaming at the mouth, anti-Russian fanatics.